Welcome to Long Lost Friends. I'm Elizabeth Eve King.
And I'm Andrea Goyan. Elizabeth and I used to do comedy together back when we were 19.
But time passed, we lost touch.
And then a few years ago, we found each other again and discovered
I'm an animal lover, painter, performer, writer, Pilates teacher, and biologist.
Wait, I'm an animal lover, painter, performer, Pilates teacher, writer, and well, I'm not a biologist, but
we're long lost friends.
And we're both speculative fiction writers.
My work has appeared in MetaStellar.
MetaStellar, for those of you who don't know, is an online magazine. We publish original science fiction, horror, and fantasy. You can find out more because there's a link below.
Today, we are so excited once again to be chatting with science fiction legend Larry Niven. Some of his best known works have been with other people. Jerry Pournelle, for instance, wrote The Mote in God's Eye in 1974, Lucifer's Hammer in 1977. While his work is primarily hard science fiction using big concepts and theoretical physics, it often also includes elements of detective fiction and adventure stories. His fantasy includes a series, The Magic Goes Away, which is a rational fantasy dealing with magic as a non-renewable resources. And we certainly have a lot of non-renewable resources we're dealing with today. So welcome, Larry. Tell us about writing with partners. How do you find them? How do you work with them? Everything.
Finding them is easy. In most cases, they find me. Stephen Barnes has described tracking me down. Jerry Pournelle raised the subject of collaboration at a BoucherCon, a science fiction, a BoucherCon is a detective aficionados convention. And I don't know how successful it's been, but this was the first one. Sunday afternoon after the convention, we're sitting around. Jerry suggests doing a collaboration. And I had already collaborated with David Gerald. So it sounded like fun. David Gerald, by the way, the author of The Trouble with Tribbles in the Star Trek universe, came to us as a star. I invited him over for dinner one day, Marilyn and I, my current wife and I, and we started talking and ran to the dictionary to make a pun on Isaac Asimov's name, and wrote a novella. Later expanded it to a novel. That was a fun thing. I like working with David. Jerry Pournelle suggested getting together. It took us a few years to write our first novel, A Mote in God's Eye. There are things you need to establish if you're going to be a collaborator. First off, you may be one of those people who shouldn't collaborate. If your individual vision of the universe is too different from somebody else's, collaborators are only going to foul you up. Robert Heinlein was maybe the best of us, and he never collaborated. Here's Anthony, another of the best of us, but he shouldn't have collaborated. Second, you need to trust the guy you're working with. So don't work with an amateur. By the way, I've broken every one of these rules.
Is that why you have them?
You know them.
Or did you ever work with somebody, an amateur, say, who it worked fine?
I tend to like to lecture, apparently, and therefore I make up lists of rules. Niven's Laws was like that.
Niven's Laws. I love Niven's Laws.
Good. Stephen Barnes tracks me down, right? He looks he decides he wants to write science fiction. So he looks for somebody who can teach him. And that was me. He tracked me down at the Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society, back when we had a clubhouse. I freaked him out. I freaked him out when we first met. He introduced himself. Hi, I'm Stephen Barnes. I'm a writer. And I said, great, tell me a story.
Did he?
This does set people back on their heels. He didn't tell me a story. He handed me 3 stories in a manila envelope, little ones. And I looked them over. And long story short, we wound up collaborating the easiest way possible. Let me give you this because it's worth keeping in mind. If you're thinking about collaborating, but you don't have an idea you're both willing to jump on right away, hand your collaborator a story you gave up on and see what he can do with it. I did that with a story called The Locusts, and we were a Hugo contender that year.
Really?
Yeah.
So what had you written that wasn't, I mean, where were you at the story, sort of?
It had gotten too depressing, and I couldn't go any further with it. Steve swallowed that and came up with a reasonably happy ending. Just he didn't make any changes. He followed my script.
Wow. That's a really good idea, though.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
is.
Because there's
I've done
so
that-
much
I've
stuff
done
that
that
has
twice.
good, but you know, just not enough or too depressing. I can certainly relate to that.
Yeah. So how do you find, it's got to be a challenge sometimes to different egos when you're trying to figure something out as a collaboration?
Oh yeah, that's rule number 3 if you're counting. One of you has the veto power, and you decide that before you get into writing. Somebody's got to be able to say, no, we won't do it that way, or yes, we will do this.
So when you're when you were writing with Jerry and Steve and you, who has the veto power? Had?
Me. I've always had veto power.
So that helped.
Except working with Greg Benford, and we never needed to use that, but I would have given him the veto power.
Do you think that I've done very little collaboration, just a tiny bit, and I've sort of found that if the story idea initiated with me, then I have the veto power, and if it initiated with someone else, they have the veto power ultimately?
You gotta make the decision, and you can make it that way if you like.
Thank you.
Brenda Cooper, I know was that a?
Yeah, I think I had the veto power there. I never actually used it. We had some spare time because I'd come up to Washington to work with Stephen Barnes on a novel that our editor decided was finished.
Wow.
So Stephen was working on something else. So we had some time together and we started talking about stories. And I found I could lecture her on how to fix a story until we wound up as collaborators.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. Have you written more with her since, or?
Yes, we wrote several short stories. and a novel called, let me retrieve this. What do we call that? I'll remember, and you use your editorial powers, okay?
We'll use our editorial powers to put the name in.
You can put
I remember. We called it Building Harlequin's Moon.
Oh, cool. Now, does everybody you work with had a science back? I don't know if Steve does, but has a science background?
No, not at all. Diane Pills didn't have a science background. Diane Gerard. We wrote a short story together. That was a fantasy set in the Magic Goes Away universe.
Oh, right.
And we did that just because we were friends. She didn't seek me out. It just came up in conversation. Oh, that's another rule you need to remember. Conversation about stories, conversation about a possible collaboration. This is recreation. You're not doing actual work until you start producing text. You dare not think in terms of having lost time during a discussion of whether to collaborate. This is the fun part. Enjoy it.
Good. Yeah. We need to think about the fun part, definitely. And Edward
Absolutely.
Lerner, any specifics there?
Yes, Edward came out of the blue and suggested he wanted to write in known space, and he had some ideas that I found attractive. So we wound up producing 5 novels
Wow.
based on known space. And again, there were rules. I had the veto power. He was not allowed to set scenes on the ring world.
So where were you say known space? So
Yeah, known space is everything, including the ring world, in a universe that involves outsiders whose metabolism is based on liquid helium, superfluid helium. Fast and light travel in late known space, but not in early known space. Too much to tell you about. The lawyers are still arguing about that, maybe. What constitutes known space?
lawyers. This actually makes me think of one of my favorite of Niven's laws is that the only universal message in science fiction, there exists minds that think as well as you do, but differently.
Yes, that's the
I
way I've written.
I think that's really powerful that a lot of people don't say where it's not, because, I just think that's a really good one. And with collaborators too, I would think.
good point.
Also, I'm gonna just give you a couple of my other ones, just a few of my favorites, not all of them, don't worry. If the reader doesn't get it, let it not be your fault.
Yes.
You are also, I think, kind of famous for saying you use simple language, use contractions, make it easy. The ideas are the complicated part.
Explain it all. And timing your explanations can be an art form. You have to learn how to hit the reader with an explanation when he wants it. And when he wants it is up to you. You've got to shape that.
And do you have any, because I run into this sometimes too, I'm trying to use, the story idea I have now about arcania and bacteria and the way our tree of life is set up. And I'm trying to figure out when and how to explain the science background to the reader without it being like a dumping ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an art form. You need to teach yourself.
You think it's better to do it in dialogue?
Sure.
Okay.
What can I tell you? It's still an art form. You still need to teach yourself. And when dialogue is called for, that's worth doing. If you want an example, look for the hot fudge sundae diatribe in Lucifer's Hammer, where two scientists are explaining how an asteroid impact works, or rather a comet impact. We had a wonderful friend who served as our example, Dan Alderson. We called him Dan Forrester. Look for it. It's a perfect example of how to lecture when the reader needs to know things.
Cool. So there's also, I'm going to read a couple of more just for fun, okay? Because I wanted to read them. That's all. So there's a technical literary term for those who mistake the opinions and beliefs of characters in the novel for those of the author. The term is idiot. Never throw shit at an armed man. Never stand next to someone who's throwing shit at an armed man. Never fire a laser at a mirror.
The shit comments arose from the 1964 Democratic National Convention, the action going on outside with a dissident group who was actually putting shit in baggies and throwing them at cops. Cops reacted about as you'd expect if you thought about it.
Yeah, exactly.
See, your nose goes right to your brain. There's brain tissue up at the top of your nose. It's a short circuit when your nose smells shit being thrown at you. You're supposed to react right away. Your brain doesn't get much choice.
So that's now. I
Throw
know.
Hard man. It doesn't matter if he's wearing a uniform.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I try and avoid armed men altogether. Just
Wise, yes.
no matter what I've got in my hands. It's like, okay. It's that never fire a laser at a mirror.
Yeah. That's for self-criticism.
For self-criticism?
Yes. Or criticism of anyone who is guilty of your sins.
I think I actually have a book where they do fire a laser at a mirror.
And I remember a scene from Buck Godot, a cartoon, science fiction. Do you know of Buck Godot?
I don't think so.
Phil Folio is the artist and story writer, and he's a very funny man. He had a guy firing lasers at Buck as Buck runs down the street, and across the street is his opponent firing laser into a mirror shop. Flash.
That's a good end. I think mine makes a hole finally. It's like where it's my detective was struck by lightning who fires into a laser into a mirror at the end. I think. So I also, okay, I'm gonna put two more just because. There's no cause so right that one cannot find a fool following it.
Yes. You need to know this if you're gonna read a newspaper or turn on a TV set. The opponents can always find a fool to serve as their mark. And the media will usually do that.
Especially now. I mean, now
Especially
it's like
now.
I read something, I always have to check it, and even so, half the times I'm still not convinced. Is this true? It's so difficult to know what's true now. I don't know. I guess it always was. You think it's more so now?
I don't think so, unless they were simply making up their spokesman in previous eras. In Abraham Lincoln's day, they could find anything they liked or make it up, and nobody would check them. We didn't have good communications.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe it's better now. What do you think? Technology?
It's better now, and you can still find a fool following any cause you want to downgrade.
No, I think that's such a good point though, because yeah, wait, especially today, it tends to be like you're either believe this or you're a fool. It's not this.
Yeah, fools are not in short supply.
Is that's not one of your rules, but it should be. You've got a new rule.
If you like it for a quote, go ahead.
Yeah, we can. We also have any damned fool can predict the past.
Mm.
And okay, well, two more. Okay, sorry, I have to do two more. I promise, these are the last two. Mother Nature doesn't care if you're having fun.
Yeah. Mother Nature also doesn't mind if you're having fun.
Right.
Go ahead and enjoy yourself, but use your brain, because Mother Nature isn't going to warn you more than once.
And sometimes the warning is really bad.
Yes.
So that's true. And also, it's easier to destroy than to create.
I've certainly found so with all of the reading I've ever done. Bringing down the World Trade Center towers didn't take anything like the effort it took to put them up. If we weren't natural builders, we wouldn't have built anything that was still standing.
Exactly. They're doing, what was it? Oh, I saw an interesting thing. They were talking about, animals who can change the landscape. Of course, we're the top. And then they were going into beavers, mostly beavers. Also, of course, ants and termites, but mostly beavers. Which we have a lot of beavers here, so I get to see beaver stuff. It's very cool.
We don't have so many beavers in Tarzana.
No.
Not in LA, we don't.
No beavers there.
No beavers.
Well, thank you so much for talking. And we always end with the best thing we learned this week. So I have to remember what I said the best thing I learned this week was. Do you have one, Andrea?
Sure, I'll start. Mine isn't really, well, it was just something that caught my eye. It was in one of those 30 best photographs of the week. And so then I went and looked it up. There's an exhibit that ends, I think, tomorrow at the Pyramids of Giza. And it's like bringing some modern art to the area, and they're huge sculptures that people have put up. And there's one in particular that there was a picture of that just grabbed me. It's an Italian artist, and his name is Lorenzo Quinn, and he's got these two hands coming up out of the sand. They're huge. They're metals, but the metal looks like it's got way, the movement, the musculature and the the hands just are so beautiful. They show it from the thumb side, and they're touching. And then underneath the thumbs are 3 pyramids in the background. And it's about communication through time. And it's just stunning. And I recommend anybody go look up the exhibit. It's called Forever is Now. And I'm sure there'll be pictures up afterwards when this comes out and stuff. It's just a beautiful, really exciting. There's another hand one too. The 2 hand ones grab me the most, but the rest are really cool too. It's just beautiful.
Wow.
It's the first time in the 4,500 years that they've done something like this on the site, right? Kind of.
So where's the site?
The pyramids of Giza in Egypt.
Oh, wow. So that's, yeah.
Background. So that's why this guy was like, I got the pyramids as my background, and it's so beautiful.
Oh, that's very cool. Okay, I remember I remember my best thing now.
Okay.
It deals with pangolins who sadly, as probably everybody knows, those strange, they look almost armadillo-ish or something. They're very endangered because people think they're going to help your sex life. But trust me, anyone listening to this, pangolins are going to ruin your sex life. Don't buy any. But they have these interesting scales is the way they fit together, and they can that's why they can change their shape in that way. And so they wanted to do in London a design of the Waterloo station, and they wanted it to be very beautiful, but the Waterloo station's built in this curving way. And so when they tried to fit roof tiles, they couldn't figure out how to do it. And finally they decided to use the shape of the pangolin tiles with joiners that could be more movable and flexible. And they did these glass pangolin scales that they then fitted together so that the light comes in. And because of the way the pangolin scales can move within a skeleton, within a structure and their joints, it goes all around this round curve. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Wow, that sounds beautiful.
And just to give a plug, 30 Animals That Made Us Smarter on the BBC is a show that deals with some new technology and biomimicry using, biological solutions to our current problems. And it's just really interesting. I find that really interesting. So if you like the podcast, listen, and you're interested in biomimicry, I recommend that show.
That sounds great.
And it's your turn, Larry.
Yeah, I'm afraid I learned little this week. What I'm remembering is you, Evie, talking about fish that enslave shrimp.
They
Yes.
don't enslave them. They're actually, these kind of fish live together with a little blind shrimp.
Okay, symbiotes.
Symbiosis, yeah, more. And they live together, right? And they hold on to the shrimp.
So
the shrimp's blind.
Does the shrimp die first and then get eaten?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, who has a longer lifespan, the fish or the shrimp?
Worth looking at, I suppose.
That's a really good question. So I'm thinking the fish makes the little hole, right? And then a shrimp comes in and the shrimp will go out, he'll hold the end of the shrimp and the shrimp can go out and grab some food usually, but he doesn't see. That's why the fish has to keep hold of him because he could be eaten. So he pulls him out, but I've never said who dies. I suppose that's just whoever dies first. I don't know. I mean, I don't know lifespans, so I can't really answer that.
I can see that at a point the fish might eat the shrimp.
I don't think so in this case. Usually when you have that kind of symbiosis, that doesn't happen. I mean, usually I can't think of a relationship where they're all living together happily and then some get eaten when it's an established symbiosis, good symbiosis. So that would be right then an interesting thing. What if all the symbionts of the world suddenly turn on their hosts?
What if,
What if?
for sure.
Yeah, I think, of course, it doesn't know, but I'm interested in that and the parasitic stuff, the way organisms work together or control each other. That's really interesting. I really like that stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, in fact, here, tell me if this idea makes any sense to you, Larry. So the new tree of life, we're just on this little thing and there's all this archaea and bacteria that make up most of the tree of life. But the reason we know what these things are is because they test, right? And then they say, oh God, there's 1 million archaea here. So we extrapolate that there must be this in other places. But what if there's some bacteria and archaea working together, like, I don't know, the extremophile gang, and they're sentient and they can move around, so they're never caught in the testing. And finally, they start rising against the humans.
I couldn't follow that. I'm sorry.
I mean, I don't follow all this, the couple of the different things, but why not? I mean, it's kind of the whole cordyceps idea and all of those things. Anything in the natural world that rises up because of.
I'm saying, what if there's bacteria and archaea and it's sentient enough so when we're testing, it can just scoot over. So the scientists never see this kind of bacteria or archaea.
Right.
But they're all over. And
Bacteria that
eventually.
have been evading us.
What?
Bacteria that have been evading our instruments. Yeah, what the heck? But how would it evolve, Evie? Remember, we've only had microscopes for 400 years or so.
Right. So it's old in the archaea, but they communicate maybe like a fungus with mycelium does, so that they can avoid us.
Why not, Elizabeth? Why not?
My toenails means they're taking over.
And also if there's like viruses, bacteria, and archaea working together and we get sick, it's like every time you test a person, they'd either have, oh, this is bacterial, oh no, this is virus, but it's really this group of organisms that we've never seen. We know they're working together.
Well, how much of us is bacteria?
Well, that's too, maybe they can work with that. A lot of us.
I've been told a lot of us, a lot of what makes up our bodies is bacteria.
There's more bacteria than there is us, actually. Yeah. So, which is, kind of crazy.
Where is the mind? Still in the brain, I think. But
well, but they're also, lately, they've been talking a lot about how your gut affects your brain tissue. And they've even talked about, using like antidepressants you eat that would, and they say the gut bacteria and mind thing is more and more
connected and important. Yeah.
And they've done some tests on like people that suffer extreme depression, and their gut bacteria seems to be the same.
Yeah.
Maybe you could just, all your enemies, give them something to eat that would make their gut bacteria depressed. I don't know. But so, is there anything you're working on now that you'd like to tell us about, Larry?
Stephen and I just finished a novel called Sacred Cow. And I guess I don't want to blow any secrets, but the idea is there's a cow being used as a test bed for growing organs for transplant.
Organs.
Yeah. And I will say no more about that story.
When will that be out, approximately?
I haven't been told it's sold yet.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye out and we can put a link in where people can look for it.
Probably be in one of the magazines. Likely enough, it's analog.
Oh, great. Yeah, but we can definitely put a link in. That's on topic now, growing organs.
Yes. And and Stephen and I are working on a couple of concepts that have been knocking around in my head for decades. Suppose the president, or call him the ex-president, he's got Alzheimer's, and they found a cure, and he's getting his memory back, and somebody's trying to kill him. This,
Ooh.
like I said, decades in my head, but we're gonna integrate that into another story and see what happens with that.
That's great. I love that, getting something that's been just kicking around there forever and finally finding a way in for yourself.
I've done that over and over again.
That's
Some
great.
stories just sit in my head. The beanstalk story, Rainbow Mars, was a piece, was the notion of Svets, the time traveler, dealing with an orbital tether, a beanstalk. And nothing happened until I set it on Mars.
Wow. Well, then you have to deal with the Martian atmosphere and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yes, but it's the Martian atmosphere as in fantasy. Whatever Svets finds in the past, it's fantasy. Time travel is fantasy in Svets' universe. Time travel is fantasy in most fiction, and it still comes out better if you treat it as science fiction.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Because you've got to make things real,
Yes,
even if they're ridiculous.
lay down laws for time travel, or otherwise it's just my magic is stronger than your magic.
Well, thank you very much. We have loved talking to you again. And thank you so much for Maria and Alex Korolov for editing and producing us.
Yes, we would be lost without the two of you. And thank you again, Larry. It was a delight, because this is, for me, meeting you and getting a chance to sit with you is lovely. And we want to thank everyone for joining us today and being our guest with Larry. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future episodes that we have. And if you'd like to help support MetaStellar, the publication, and everything we're doing, check out our Patreon page and you can make a contribution there. And everybody that does anything on MetaStellar does it as a volunteer, and all the money goes just to paying our authors so that we can help support new and fiction, science fiction, horror, and fantasy for the magazine and pay the authors. So thank you so much. Thank you again, Larry, and bye. Next time, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Well.
Bye.